No Jumper, coolest podcast in the world. And today, this feels like a very important conversation to have because I've realized that there's a big segment of the population that loves hearing stories from, I don't know if we're going to call it the golden days, but an era gone by of adult entertainment. And for sure, you are like by far one of the most integral pieces to this. So I'm very excited to fill in the blanks there.
Yeah.
No pun intended. We have Lexington Steele on the podcast. How you doing, man?
What up? I'm great, man. Can't complain.
Very excited to have you here, man. How's life right now?
I can't complain. I mean, staying busy. A lot has changed in the industry.
Right.
But one of the things I enjoy working. Retired ones came back.
Right.
And, if you're doing what you love, I mean, you can do it as long as you're viable. You know what I'm saying? So I'm happy and excited that I'm still viable, you know what I'm saying? And able to do some new stuff that shows people how, in my opinion, it should continue to be done. And I like to cherish, every weekend, you know what I'm saying? Because at a certain point, if you do the math, I mean, statistically, you can put a number on the number of weekends
That you have left in life, yeah.
Yeah, so I try and cherish the moment.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to go through the whole story, but when you say that you enjoy sort of showing the next generation how things are meant to be done, what does that sort of mean to you?
Well, what I mean by that is I think that there is a way that adult media needs to be captured and produced. Not to say that the way things are being done as technology provides and the progression that we see through technology. But I think that there's a baseline appreciation for adult media as a unique media where you do have to have certain ingredients, if you will, that lead to a quality representation of adult media, because adult media continues to transition over time, but I think there are key elements that need to remain.
Right. So do you feel like something has been lost in the sort of transition to the OnlyFans era and the self-produced content era? Obviously, there are still studios shooting content and everything, but from time to time, I'll end up having a conversation with a guy who's, 50 years old, whether it's a filmer, a former producer, et cetera, and I'll kind of realize that there was an era before this in which all of the integral parts of what makes a great scene were these sort of trade secrets that are passed down to like a whispered network. There's no, that I know of, there's no big manual that teaches you every single position, and this position should be filmed from this angle, and as a guy, it's important for you to open up in this way to make the shot look this way. And there is just so much information out there. Even when I have conversations with male performers who've been doing it for a long time, and I realize that they have extremely strong opinions about what kind of furniture should be used
down to furniture
when shooting a scene. And I'm like, holy crap, that is information that is not written down anywhere that I know of. And it's the kind of thing that these guys have only figured out through talking to each other and shooting tons of content over years and years.
Well, a lot of the people that would be but the people that would end up doing a podcast or being invited to a podcast for whatever reason have, there's a reason why they're brought in, right? So if a person that is a director or producer and he says in his mind, boom, I need a two-seat love seat, not a couch. I don't need a 3-seater. I don't need a chair. I need a 2-seater. That specification is why that person is qualified to be doing a podcast, because he knows that if it's a 3-seat couch, maybe the frame isn't necessarily too wide, too broad for the type of way you want to capture the sex. But if you have a 2-seater, it gives enough for the couple to do their things, keeping the shot in frame. But these are things that these would be qualified as the long answer. And most people may not get the opportunity to be made aware of the long answer to why we do these things. But I would say the wonderful thing about what's happening today is that you see a lot of entrepreneurship that was not possible years ago, if only a couple years ago, where a woman who, say you take a woman who for every reason, should be just as acclimated and accredited a porno director as the next person, but maybe never got her chance because the studios it's really tough to get a directorship at a studio in our industry, you know. And something like OnlyFans gives her a chance to not only show her creativity, but be the entrepreneur that she's always been, but now she's able to put herself on a broader market. And I think that affects the adult media community more positively than negatively.
Right. And that's one thing I keep consistently hearing is, like, for example, anal was much more commonly shot in the 90s or the 2000s, et cetera. And now that women have more of a say in porn, you do see less of it because obviously from a guy's perspective, yeah, let's do anal.
No,
from a girl's perspective, it takes a little bit more work.
Well, I mean,
you tell me. I might be wrong, yeah.
Well, no, you're right. I mean, in terms of, you know, preparation, a girl has a lot more considerations before doing anal scene. I mean, you know, you're talking like what people may know, the professionals, they're taking maybe 24, 48 hours of denying themselves what they may normally eat in preparation for an anal scene, so there are no accidents while on camera, and these things happen. But I will say that not every guy is, you know, like anal is something I don't do I don't like doing anal I've never done anal in my personal life.
Never, or almost
it's not
never.
my thing.
Right.
No, I've never wanted to put my dick in a girl's ass in my personal life. And even on video, if you look at the stuff that's produced by my label and my brand, I have a lot of anal in there, and I'm known for it, but it's not my personal favorite. You know what I'm saying? So there are things that are done for the market, you know what I'm saying, that we may not necessarily appreciate in our personal lives.
And because me as a fan and you as a performer, we've kind of lived through this crazy extreme porn era.
Oh,
a lot of the stuff I grew up.
Even by name, Extreme Associates was a studio known for,
right.
You know,
that was the way to get attention at a certain point. Was let's do this crazy.
Pushing
yeah,
you know.
One of the first adult films I ever saw was 80 Guy Cum Burrito.
Oh man, even
it was a with Ava Devine. And she was holding a tortilla under her face,
and then.
This was one of the. I'm talking. I was 13.
Yeah. No. I shot her. You know what I'm saying? Right around that time, she would have done that.
Yeah.
You know.
Very legendary.
Yeah. I mean, Ava Devine. I mean, she's had many iterations over her tenure. And I like this one now. I think she's a little bit more toned down than she used to be.
Right. I don't know that there's much of an incentive to do extreme stuff like that.
I mean, there's a market, bro, for everything.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? I've never got into. Well, let's just say that I've never produced that type of stuff.
Right.
You know, but there are, you know, like there's a company called GGG that I watch on Pornhub, European company, and they do a lot of those and so forth. And they're orgies where you might have multiple girls. You know, there is some fucking, so it's not just a deluge of cum shots.
Right.
You know, it's just the notion that there are a few companies and studios that are, as you said, pushing that envelope even to this day. So, you know, I don't really watch too much media, not even my own.
Really?
You know what I'm saying? Nah. So it's like, you know.
Were you always like that, or was there a time in the 90s or 2000s where you were really still interested in actually watching porn? Sometimes it's odd when I end up in a party or a conversation at a party, and I realize I'm talking to a fellow performer who is so into porn that they're watching like every new release, and I'm over here feeling guilty, like, oh Lord, like I don't have that kind of interest.
Well, you know what has happened over the years. I mean, when I'm editing the stuff that I'm in, you get more into the, you know, the post-production aspect.
The film and the lighting.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
everything.
I might be more concerned with how long a particular shot is held before in the edit, before getting out of it, and, you know, what's next. So that's on my own stuff. But then I think as you can probably agree, you know, it sometimes becomes difficult to watch people that you know personally. You know what I'm saying? I might take a personal attitude towards a girl that pops up on what I'm looking at. I'm like, you know what I'm saying? Oh, I know her, you know, for whatever reason. I'm like, man, I am not going to watch. So it got to the point where I rarely watch, you know. And the thing is, you know, it allows me to really channel myself when I'm actually performing. You know what I'm saying? So being highly visual, now I can be tangible. So watching it doesn't really appeal to me so much. So I would rather wait till I'm doing a scene, or if I'm, you know, having some relations in my personal life. You know?
Am I out of my mind? Because a couple weeks ago, a girl I know who I consider to be somewhat of a bad person, I saw a clip of her doing, you know, a 10 guy blow bang.
Right.
And it immediately, in my head, I was like, oh, I'm going to watch that.
Yeah, because you're waiting for the point that, you know, she's gonna take it, you know, the whole myriad of load in her face, hopefully.
But meanwhile, if she was someone that I loved as a person,
Yeah.
I might not have felt the need to go check that out.
Check it. Well, you know what's crazy along those lines is when you there's certain women that you hold in a certain appeal, and then you find out that what their parameters are far greater than what you thought. Like there's a number of girls where I'm like, man, you know, I loved having worked with this chick. She's, you know, a 10 in every category. And then you find out she did ghetto gaggers.
Yeah.
For instance, you're like, oh man, she did that? Or another, right? You know what I'm talking about as far as ghetto gaggers.
Yeah. And I like how
those ones.
when you go to their site, it's like almost the exact same shot thumbnail for every single video.
And little do you know.
Like they figured out what works for them.
Yeah, you go a little bit deeper and there's one where she's got, so I learned to not ruin the fantasy I have, you know what I'm saying, for a particular female that I may have worked with, and then, you know, because there are certain companies, right, and there are certain individuals that could get a different response from the same girl. You know, and a perfect example is if you're familiar, if those out there that are familiar with Rocco Siffredi, great Italian performer,
right?
Probably the greatest performer in history of pornography. If people didn't know, check out Rocco Siffredi. What I've known him, and Mark Davis is also like this too. Marcus as well. Brian Pumper as well.
You consider him one of the ghosts. That's very interesting. Okay.
Well, Brian, Brian could do something that no one else can do.
What's that?
But before that, I will say this.
Okay.
Those gentlemen that I just mentioned, it's a skill I learned, and I'm still learning, the ability to get a woman to do, and I don't mean the coercion in any way, but bring out a sexuality in a woman that she may not release in anybody else's scene. What I've seen some girls do with those guys, when I work them, I'm like, damn, she didn't do that with me. You know, you know what I'm saying? Especially with Rocco, man, what he would have the same chick do. I'm like, there's no way she did that. And you look at, she did it, right?
Wow.
Now with Pumper in particular, Brian was, and then people don't know, Brian was the best at recruiting I
heard you say that on a little interview clip you did with him. Yeah,
man, it's incomparable. Well, Marcus has a similar charisma, but Brian is Brian can speak to. He's very congenial, whereas he can make friends, fast friends. You know,
I feel like you might be kind of referring to a prior. I don't know that Brian Bumper is necessarily able to recruit the same way that he used to. You think?
I'm telling you,
I don't want to take anything away from
you gotta remember. I would say that it goes a long way. I think a person's charismatic energy, I think, does not, dissipate. One can hone it,
Right.
use it can in Brian's case, perhaps having weaponized it, if you will, But from when I met Brian, I saw Brian, I happened upon Brian at Venice Beach maybe a month or two.
Yeah.
And it's the first time I've seen him in like 4 years.
Right.
But he was down there getting, meeting people and getting, media clips where he's just stopping people as they walk by. And it was something that he's done very well. But he had an ability to recruit, for better or worse, when I unless you want to get, I don't, but he had an ability to meet people.
Right.
And meet women, beautiful girls that perhaps had no interest. Now, perhaps he arrived at that girl doing a scene in a way that is debatable as to whether it should have went that way. But I'm just talking on purely being able to meet someone, a woman on site, and her being willing to get into a business where she would otherwise have no interest. And he was able to do this without I mean, you know, so I'm saying there are certain skill sets that are real.
We've all known dudes in our life who had the gift of gab, where they were able to be in a bar and go chat up a group of girls and sort of win them over. And maybe you're the more high value male, theoretically, but this dude's got the gift of being able to talk to him. And I've always kind of admired that. And to combine that with also being a stellar male performer is kind of a rare combination. A lot of the male performers I know, not necessarily the best talker, you know?
Well, you know, it's a skill that I wish I learned when I was in college, as a matter of fact, is the ability to socialize in a bar environment, right? Because as you get older, you realize that those social skills are applicable in many environments.
And
right?
nobody teaches you that.
You can't. No, it's a learned behavior.
Right.
I mean, like if I never liked beer, right? So I would never be in the bars at Syracuse. I went to Syracuse University. I would never be at the bars drinking beer because I don't like beer. And similarly, you know, I have good friends that are into salsa right now, right? And I would love to go salsa dancing. I can dance, but I would love to go salsa, but I don't like the music. So I miss out on that opportunity because I don't like the music. So it's just a case of, you know, you go where you enjoy it, you know, and then, you know, so.
No, definitely. Okay, just to rewind a little bit, you're from Jersey.
Right.
And you had a pretty traditional upbringing, or what was life like coming up?
Man. I mean, I had fantastic parents. You know what I'm saying? I grew up in suburban New Jersey, a town called Morristown, rather historic town, headquarters of the American Revolutionary Army. George Washington had a property called Mount Vernon, in which he lived out his post military career. So it's a historic town in New Jersey. Brady Bunch lifestyle, you know, mother and father in house, older sister. I had friends of, you know, our neighborhood had, you know, kids of all different, you know. Now my parents were the first black family to move into that neighborhood. Having moved there in 1952, I was born, my sister was born. My parents actually had a fun time before they had us. So by the time they had my sister and then me, they had a pretty fun, not, you know, they did their thing and had a good time. But got to remember, it was the 50s and the 60s, you know what I'm saying, and late 50s rather, early to mid 60s, you know, in that time. So it was a different period for them. But when I came around, I had a wonderful childhood. You know? And the thing about it is, like, you know, I was an athlete my whole life. Going to college was not an option in my household. My sister went to school before me, 3 years before I went to school. Our college this is. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, and then that led to a professional career after school, after college.
So at what age did you decide that you wanted to become a stockbroker? Because that was your first real career, right?
Well, yeah, you know, I'll tell you what happened. Coming into my senior year at Syracuse, I really didn't know what I was preparing to take the LSAT. Because you know, my specialty was history, American history. So I was going to study constitutional law, and I was preparing for the LSAT. And that fall semester, a lot of the collegiate workshops would have recruiters, you know, and it would be big job fairs, because Syracuse is a big communications school. Perhaps maybe Northwestern is arguable. But Syracuse is a big communication school. So the job fairs at Syracuse would bring in like super serious opportunities. My background in history didn't lend itself to that. But what these job fairs also brought in were financial institutions that were looking for people for students that are near graduation. So I started interviewing with a lot of the financial institutions, and there was one that really, that was interested in me, and I took an opportunity. And so I came out in May of '93. I was literally walking down to 67 Wall Street by June of '93, and I was licensed in, I think, April of '94. I earned my Series 7, my Series 63, and those two.
So basically, you were building a pretty nice life for yourself. Were you living in the city?
I mean, I moved into the city probably. I moved out of my parents' house as soon as I got out of school. Was in my parents' house until June of '93. So I've actually been living. I've actually, lived my own, or I guess how would you say? I moved out of my parents. I moved out June of '93. So I've been on my own for quite some time. So yeah, I mean,
And you were actually working in the World Trade Center for a period of time?
Well, my first 3 years were at was a company called MS Farrell. I don't know if they're still around, but they were literally, we were right across the street from J.P. Morgan, big ass J.P. Morgan building, where the guys from Wolf of Wall Street had a floor or two. I knew those guys.
Really?
From the real firm.
Right.
I knew those guys personally. I moved to Oppenheimer in '96, late '95, early '96, and I was on the 36th floor. Oppenheimer operated a number of floors in the building, although, I think there was only 2 or 3 floors at the time in Tower 2. Had I still been a broker, I don't know whether I still would have been with Oppenheimer in the towers. If I had been with Oppenheimer over those course of those years, I perhaps may have been in that building.
Right.
When the towers came down, I lost 4 friends.
Wow.
Yeah, 2 friends from college, 2 very close associates that I worked with over my the 5 or 6 years as a broker that I knew. My best friend, dude I grew up with, had a flat in Jersey City, right across the water, right? So when he gets to the PATH train that goes underneath the Hudson, right, on the New Jersey side, but he hit snooze twice. So he got up late, to the PATH train that would have had him underneath had him arriving underneath the tower when they came down.
Wow.
So my best friend, if not for hitting snooze twice, he might have been underneath. So it hit pretty close to home.
Wow.
When it happened, I remember everything that took place, I'm saying, that morning.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So how do you somehow start to pivot out of living the life of a square, of a stockbroker, to all of a sudden you're slowly getting into the adult industry? What had to happen, and what year was that?
All right, so boom. 90, like I said, I was licensed in 96 or so. Now, if becoming a broker is something that's really risky, whereas if you make it to the point where you become licensed and then you start out on your own, because you don't get it's not a salaried position. So it's like sink or swim. So if you are licensed at a certain point, everybody begins to respect you a little bit more, and then you get invited to the social events. Now, like, boom, I've never, I can't say I've never done coke, but wink, wink. But I would just say that as a young man, I did not.
Okay. And that was a big part of the social scene at the time?
Oh my God. Like I put it like this, because I didn't partake and I was unaware. I was never invited to the social events. So once I began to make money is when people came respect, a little bit more respect, and then you got invited to certain things. And so what I came to realize, ironically, when I went to see the movie Wolf of Wall Street, that scene with Leonardo DiCaprio and Matthew McConaughey when they're at the restaurant near the window,
right?
Right, when he tells him about doing blow, the secret to this business, and he pulls out a vial. DiCaprio was stunned. Like, what are you talking about? Well, that shit is true. I literally almost fell the fuck out of the chair of the theater because I had no idea that everyone around me was fucking, I mean, doing rails like you wouldn't believe. Because here's the thing, Adam, we was, you know what I'm saying, we followed the Nikkei, right? So we were at our offices like 5:30, right? You know what I'm saying? Because Nikkei opens hours before ours. So by 7 p.m., 12, 14 hours later, I'd be like, let me get the fuck out of here. I can dial another, you know. These guys would take a half-hour break about 7 o'clock, come back upstairs, and then blast for another 2 or 3 hours. I couldn't do it. And those were the guys that were making a lot of money, the guys that could go till 10 p.m. I couldn't do it. I was like, well, how can you guys do it? I was always amazed. So when I saw that movie, I was like, wow, that's how some of them did it. Now, the first firm I was at, yes, because that was more of a, not a boiler room, if you will, but more of a
sketchy atmosphere.
Well, no, it wasn't sketchy, but it was like the boardroom, the proverbial boardroom. Most people think that it means boiler room. A boardroom is just a big den of retail brokers, you know. Oppenheimer was a bit more cushy, bit more plush. I mean, like each broker had a redwood. We had our own redwood square cubicle, you know, but everybody was doing it. And it was a means that a lot of guys used to become young millionaires. And not that I would have partook at that time because I was still an athlete. I was still playing soccer. You know, and so I didn't want to. I wouldn't have done it.
Which thankfully you had that instinct, because as a grown man now, I think of that and I'm like, wow, the abuse on your body that cocaine will do to you and the lack of sleep, et cetera. It's just like hard for me to imagine any benefit that you could get in your career that would actually compensate for it. And also, listen, if you want to stay up all night, you could do something like Adderall. You could, but there's a lot of better options.
Yeah, but we're talking circa, you know, from my experience would have been like, you know, we're talking 93 through 90, you know, 98, 99, you know, those, you know, I'm saying the people that I knew, in retrospect, they were blown out. And like I said, something I know that I wouldn't have gotten into at that age because, like I said, I was still playing sports, you know, and that's something that had stayed with me for a very long time. Whereas I've had a lot of experiences where I've been around a lot of recreational drugs, but going back to how it got me into the business, and I'm sorry, I kind of went off track.
Okay.
This is what happened. The first party I was invited to was a gangbang, 16 on 1. I bought a friend of mine, my best friend I told you that would have, you know, he was also in finance. He came with me. We were 17 and 18 in an 18 on 1 gangbang.
Wow.
Right? Now, I get there, I'm seeing 4 or 5 of our managing directors in line, the line that circled around the room.
Holy shit.
And everybody was waiting their turn. Now, it was so funny because everybody was butt naked, right? The chick was in the middle of the room, the line circled the walls and then ended with her in the middle of the room.
And is she being paid for this, or is
no,
this
utterly recreational?
Wow, for the love of the game. Amazing. Okay.
Well, you know, and so these are some of the fun things that were available to that type of recreational activity of brokers.
Right.
Now, there were other activities that would include going to the Hamptons or what have you. You know, I never experienced that because I never hung with the guys that were making that kind of money. See what I'm saying? So the guys that I was with were the guys that were still grinding. You know what I'm saying? We weren't like, you know, the blue bloods as of yet. But everybody was doing the finest of the finest, the sickiest of the icky.
And was this one of the first experiences like this that you'd been invited to? And was it just automatic to you? Like, yeah, that sounds like a good time.
Well, it wasn't automatic to me. No, it was something that I took to like a fish out of water, like a fish into water. You know what I'm saying? It was somebody, but it was crazy because I met the first individual that pointed me in the direction that led to me getting into movies. There was a guy there that that led me to magazines back when people look.
It's a big part
like
of
this is
of
like
the
last.
game, yeah.
It's crazy because I speak of this, and it literally is last century. And the fact, hardcore magazines is where I started out, and then that led to meeting a producer out of the Bronx.
Wait, so you would go shoot a porn scene, but it would just be photos?
Yeah, bro.
No video camera. Wow, that's interesting.
Okay, so Matt, so we're in a studio, a fully professional studio, right? So it would be lit such as your studio is, and then of course a photographer. Problem is the magazine. Very few magazines had penetration photos, so you had to have. They wanted you to have an erection and keep it right at her mouth or right at the point of entry, but not in. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? She could act like she was going to touch you, but she couldn't. So you had to be able to maintain the posture of an erection without actually any application thereof. Very, very difficult. And the thing is if you could do those, then you got the opportunity to do the magazines in which you could penetrate. That was another level. And then the next level was, could you do video? So when I met the person that gave me opportunity on video, I provided him magazines that showed me doing photos, the magazines, that showed I could do it. And then the same dude, I got into that was when I started doing some other professional work, putting in work professionally, no camera, so.
Escorting, type stuff.
Yeah.
How do you even get introduced to that?
Well, I mean, for hetero men, it's a very, very limited market because most of the market is for the other side, which I had no interest in the connection thereof was never, a part of my whole ethos, But, the same guy that introduced me to the magazine person, we used to do, he had a client, for instance, a perfect example, he had a client that would exploit some of his own borrowers, if you will. He was a New York guy, lower Manhattan type of guy, a guy that would wear a velour sweatsuit with a gold chain, silver hair.
Okay,
perfectly
you're painting the picture right now.
You know what I'm saying? A guy that could use words like mullion, eggplant, and you would not have a problem with it because it wasn't necessarily a racial statement. It wasn't a descriptive statement. But nonetheless, you wouldn't say anything to this guy. He was very wise.
Probably a lot of casual racism back then that hit differently than it would now, right?
It's regional. It's regional.
Right.
With the understanding that I'm a little bit older, so I remember when, certain words didn't have the same abrasive cachet. They were no less abrasive, but it wasn't something where you like. And there are certain people that could say whatever they wanted to your face, and it would be like, I'm good with that.
Were you chosen at the gangbang just because they noticed that you were larger than the other guys?
No, you mean to be invited to the gangbang?
Oh, no, afterwards. Like once you're there and you've got your clothes off, did somebody just spot you and say like, oh, you could do something in this business?
It was funny because the broker that trained me started calling me Log Cabin. And, once because here's the thing. When we were in the room, if you were in close proximity to someone, because I remember there's only one chick and there's guys running around, gangbang. My eyes would not go below your nose. So everybody was, if you were next to me or adjacent to me, we were talking, we could hold a full conversation. I'm getting myself warmed up, you're maintaining yourself being warmed up, but our eyes would never go below our eyesight line. But if somebody across the room would have the peripheral, and so that was like, hey, they called me by my first name, but hey, Log Cabin, and I was like, ah, so that's what stuck. And the guy that was there, he was, that's how I got started,
Definitely. So, at what point do you move to LA at some point, or do you start shooting porn in New York?
All right. Oh man, shoot, man, we were like buccaneers, man. Like I got into a lot of fun. Like I was in a traveling troupe called the Gentle Giants, right? And this is going back. This was 90. '95 through '98 when I moved to LA in '98.
Mm-hmm.
But the Gentle Giants, we would travel from New Hampshire, as far north as New Hampshire, to as far south as Virginia, to as hosting or being hosted at lifestyle events.
Right. And this isn't a paid opportunity. This is just for the love of the game.
No, I mean it was just recreational for us.
Right.
The thing is like at this point, it wasn't commercialized because if say a husband and wife in the lifestyle, if they were swingers, as you know, right? So say if they're swingers and they want to capture the moment with this is when people had the big shoulder mounted cameras, the big.
Right.
This is before the VX1, even the VX1000s before that.
Guys want to see dudes with huge dicks fuck their wives, and then they want to make their own personal copy of it so they can relive this.
So they when they can watch it, and then the both of them get excited. They have a great time. Years later, they're like, let's look at the the night when, and that it's a cool thing. So we would travel up and down. Sometimes we were compensated, or we never had to pay for the accommodation.
Right.
And the parties would be like Friday night and Saturday night. And Friday night was great. Saturday night was better because you had people that were there Friday would come to the Saturday event, and the Saturday event would be twice as big as the Friday event. And I was a younger dude, so I had the resilience of a younger dude.
And this is an era where there's no pills.
No,
right?
no, there was no. I mean,
you're just
no.
all on your own, right?
No, you could do. I mean, well, it was fun.
Yeah,
it wasn't a pressurized situation that like a movie thing would be.
Right.
But yeah, it was before. It was before any of the
different era.
Yeah,
you had to really have it in you.
Yeah, well, you had to
be
really
horny.
want to do it. But like I said, it wasn't a commercialized environment.
It's
like
just interesting because when I was sitting here having the same conversation with Dredd, and I realized he was in the lifestyle for many years before he realized that this was something that he could monetize.
Yeah.
He was just doing it for the love of the game, getting flown out to go work with somebody's wife off camera, just for fun.
Yeah.
Which if you didn't know that you can make money from it, then of course, sounds like a good time.
I was made very well aware of the money making. Now the swinger part of it, that was more recreation than trying to make a buck. But the other stuff that was happening, even the stuff that I'm sure that you talked about with Dredd, those paid gigs, those were like, the dude I was talking about in New York, he actually had circumstances that I can't even speak on. And in retrospect, it reminds me of some of the stuff that people are being accused of today. But there was a lot of stuff that was happening, in terms of sex for recreation, sex for, commercialized sex, and sex out of certain degrees of obligation. You know what I'm saying? That can or cannot be in one's best interest to speak on.
Right. Okay. I feel you.
Yeah.
So at what point do you realize I want to make this my life? That this is a career. This is a better way to earn a living than being a stockbroker.
All right. So I would say this is wild. Okay. So I got out here in '98, and I started working for a company called Anabolic. At the time, Anabolic was like the premier, next to Evil Angel, the premier gonzo company.
Okay.
Best stuff in the world. They also had a line called World Sex Tour, where they traveled the world shooting in various places all over. So my first summer of '98, by then I still was licensed. I was still, you have 2 years after your last execution to still maintain your license, right? So when I came into '98, I knew I had till 2000 to make a decision: back to Wall Street or stay in the business. My license was still good till 2000. So summer of '99, I got to the point where I was traveling. I was on the travel team with Anabolic. I was one of the 4 or 5 guys that they would take on these trips across the globe. So a buddy of mine that my best friend, which I speak of often, he was about to go to grad school, business school, and took a vacation. I said, well, we're going to be in France. Come out to France, and because we were going to Cannes. This was around Cannes Film Festival. So we went to Cannes and then Paris. This is summer of 1999. And literally I'm sitting out front of, I still remember the clothes I had on, this shirt my man had on. I'm at the fucking Eiffel Tower.
Mm-hmm. Ironically.
Yep. And I said to him, I said, yo, I said, you know what? I said, I'm out here. And now, Cannes to Paris was on me.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we flew out to Cannes for the festival and to work. And then from there, for me, Paris was because I'm already out here in France. So I'm out at the Eiffel Tower. I'm like, you know what, man? No, I'm going to keep rolling with this. I mean, like, there's no way I would have been at the Cannes Film Festival. I'm 5 or 6 years out of college. I wasn't making exceptional money as a broker. I was still a struggling broker, you know, in the game, of course. But I wasn't like I was a big swing, if you will, you know. So yeah, I was like, you know what, man, what got me here, I wouldn't have been here. So yeah, that was when I decided, summer of '99, at the Eiffel Tower. I'm like, man, fuck this. I'm gonna ride this shit until, you know, because the emails, I didn't lose my intelligence. I was only gonna lose my licensing,
Right.
which meant I could get my licensing back by just passing the test.
And this is a different era in which if you're doing porn, you might be less likely to be discovered by other people in your life because it is something that you had to go out of your way to see. Whereas now, if you do porn, realistically,
countdown,
your Facebook feed will be lit up in a matter of days or weeks
hours,
with
you know.
this revelation. Was there any kind of consideration about that? Especially because you say you come from a good family. You could imagine your family might have been like, oh, this is not what we worked so hard to rise up in society
no
for
doubt.
our kids to do.
Nah, but here's the thing. I was 28.
Right.
So, you know, at 28, you know, my parents were like, yo, he's a grown-ass man. So my mother was just like, look, you know, don't get sick. And that was when there was a really fear of contraction of HIV. So my mother was like, that's what she meant when she said don't get sick.
Right.
She said don't have a kid unless you want to have a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me those two things. My father literally didn't say anything because he knew that he hadn't had to support me since they got me out of college. So once I graduated from college and then I moved out of the crib, I came home in May, was out of their house by June, my father was like, yo, he's been... They knew they did a good job because I didn't, you know, I was able to fly the coop right after I got out of school. So I didn't cost him any more money after college. So my dad was like, what can you say to me? And then plus while my mother didn't necessarily know how the financial thing worked, my dad knew that he knew that I could still return to doing finance within a window. But he also knew that at 28, you know, how much influence was he going to have?
You're your own man. A lot of guys, even if you're well endowed, have a hard time performing. Even guys who I know have been doing it for years and years and years still will have a hard time performing sometimes. Did you ever experience anything like that, or were you always kind of a natural?
No, I mean, no. I mean, yeah, I've been natural, but I'm saying, have I failed? No, have I failed? Yes.
But it was because, okay, just for an example, Dredd would have gotten into the industry way earlier, but one of his first scenes he couldn't finish, and that I think he said he took 3-4 years off before he revisited it, which I thought was really interesting because if you do your first scene and everything goes smoothly, you might be more likely to get into it. If you do your first scene and it doesn't go well, you might just get frustrated, right?
Yeah. Well, look, I got to say that I can't speak to anybody else's, you know, beginnings, humble beginnings or otherwise. In my case, by the time I got to LA in '98, I had been in the minor leagues, if you will, since for almost 3 years of recreational activity where there would be a camera, maybe not. I had been in circumstances where I had been being paid to be there to execute sex, right? So by the time I got to the major leagues out here in LA, I was already like it's like paying like a baseball player, because how many baseball players go from high school to the league? Most of them spend a number of years in the minors. So by the time they get to the league, they're older, but what? They play longer. Whereas sometimes a person can try and jump from high school straight to the NBA or early in high college straight to the NBA, and they fail because they didn't have the Bush League years to make it. You can't even go from high school to the NFL because you got to get your man weight up.
Right.
That is inscribed in the beginning. They know you're going to get mowed over by a guy that's got 3 kids and a mortgage. You're 18, you're going to stop this guy, right?
Right.
So for me, porno was like that. I had a chance to become while being considered a rookie. I was well trained for doing it in the major leagues. So, have I taken my lumps over the years? Fantastic failures.
Really?
I've been oh my God. I mean, the type of failures where had I had like the medical option of what's available today,
Right.
I would have taken 2 or 3. Give me a handful like Skittles. I've been in circumstances,
Right.
So.
Because people don't realize there's so much about porn, in particular from the male perspective, that the average person would not expect.
Shocking.
And so when I start saying that a fairly large percentage of the time when I've had to hire male talent to have sex with somebody else on camera, that it doesn't work, and that in some situations these guys are very, very experienced. They've been doing it for a long time. In some situations, they're like blatantly on a bunch of dick pills and still have a hard time with it. That could be very hard for people to wrap their head around how that could happen. And a lot of people don't seem to understand the magnitude of that failure at times. I've had people tell me about scenes that were shot in foreign locations, places that were extremely expensive to rent for a day or whatever. They fly out. The girl has to be gone the next day. And once you start to, if you fuck up and everything is holistic and the girls are cool about it and everything, and then it can be it could be one thing to recover and get yourself back into the mentality, but that amount of pressure of knowing if I don't finish this in the next couple hours, everybody's going to be mad at me. The girls are annoyed. The director's annoyed. I'm not going to necessarily get paid what I was supposed to get paid, et cetera. Like, that amount of pressure can make it unbelievably hard for a guy to perform when he's in the heat of the moment.
Yeah. Well, all those things are 100% true. But I have to say that at the commercial level, you're paid to execute. You know what I'm saying? The name of my company is Mercenary Pictures. And the reason why I called it Mercenary Pictures because I always fashioned myself the ultimate mercenary, right? I'm being paid to execute.
I will get the job
I'll
done.
get the job done.
Yeah.
You call me in if I agree to do it. Now, commensurate to that is the pressure and the obligation. One of the things that people don't take into consideration is that it doesn't get any easier the better you become in the business. People are like, oh, Lex, you got a chance to work with the most beautiful girls in the industry, what have you. But my obligation might be 10 times greater than another individual who is working with a lesser female, and then perhaps a less pressure-filled circumstance. Because if there's a commitment on an A-list girl, the company is going to spend this much more money on her, then they have to go all in and hire a guy that makes sure that they can maximize the utility that they're spending. So I'm the type of person that has always gotten hired to work with the most expensive of talent in the most difficult of circumstances, which usually means the most beautiful circumstance. But that's the most difficult because there's so much more obligation. If the company has overspent on location and they're high spending on the girl, they need to get this shit done. So yeah. But the thing is, I signed up for it. So if it's an anal scene and I don't like anal, if it's an anal scene and I chose to show up, I stick my dick in her ass. It's not clean. I can't complain. It's her ass. Number one.
Right.
Shit happens.
But then even beyond that, people might not understand how this goes is you've got to get hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes that might take a guy a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Then you put your dick in her butt. There is some residue. This isn't just bad because it's kind of yucky for you as the guy. It's very important that this not be shown on camera. People don't want to see that. So now the girl has to go. Right, that's a different genre. But the girl has to go and get clean. She's got to deal with her whole thing. That might take 15 minutes. And so you, the guy who just worked fairly hard to get hard, now you're in the position of having to, stare at the wall, jerking yourself off, and keep yourself in the same frame of mind. That's not always easy.
It's not easy, but here's the thing. A male performer's got to get to the point where he has, as a professional, he has to have the ability to get his own engine turned on and motivate himself. Self-motivation is perhaps the greatest skill set, and it's not physical; it's purely mental. See what I'm saying? I think nowadays, compared to when I started, it's more difficult because you have a greater number of guys that can do it. When I started, it was a very few number of guys that can actually do it.
Really? Okay.
And so if you were one of the guys that could do it, you were a made man. Very quickly, you became a made man. Now it's much more challenging because there's a lot of guys that can do it. For whatever myriad of reasons, a lot of guys can now do it. So, it's never an easy thing. And I think that a lot of guys that last past that actually make it past that time of attrition where a lot of guys wash out early. If you can make it, much like a broker, if you can make it, and maybe, if you can make it to the second or third time shooting for the same director, then you've made it. Because most guys are never given a second chance. Yeah. Maybe if you're lucky, you'll get a second chance from a director. So a guy can shoot for every director at least once. And it's when you're shooting for a second or third time, then you're in there. But when I say it's mental, I think that you have to have a mental capacity to charge your own batteries, because you're not owed that from the girl you're working with.
Right. In many cases, they would be happy to help assist you.
Well, yes, and a lot of the women are beautiful,
but you can't really rely on that or expect that, because some women have different arrangements with their boyfriend or husband or whatever, so you don't want to make them feel uncomfortable or feel pressured to help you get there, even though they quite often will, from what I hear.
Well, look, I make it known, I'm very, very upfront with the girl. Like, when I meet the girl, if I don't know her, I'll be like, hey, how you doing? We'll talk, whatever. I'll try and establish some chemistry, and I'll say, well, look, I'm really glad that we're here to do what we're about to do. And so we've already addressed the fact that we're here to. It's not going to be a surprise. I don't want you to be surprised when I do certain things that are part of what I do in the scene. But it's different styles. Do
you remember the first time that you took any kind of medication in order to perform the job, or what year that might have been? And did that really fundamentally change the game for you, or was it just a change of the game in general?
Oh my God. I the first time I had been introduced to, well, I'll tell you the first time I had seen the use of chemical was around, I would say maybe 2000. We were in Prague with Anabolic, and we were shooting a gangbang on the World Sex Tour, and there was 5 Americans and 10 of the Euro guys. And after the scene briefing, before, the Euro guys all had fanny packs, and they went in different directions, and in their fanny packs were I guess the mechanisms of action they used at that time, and so that's something, and that, that's something that I never got into.
You're talking about shooting up?
Yeah.
Still something I'm very curious about that I haven't really bothered to do any extreme deep dives into. But you do hear from a lot of people, for those who don't know what we're talking about, it's like some sort of medication. You sort of prick your penis with it. It's typically for elderly people. It's not a prick.
It's not a prick.
Oh, okay.
Nah, man. Look, I mean, well, okay. So Caverjet, as is known, is a chemical that had been created for paraplegics,
right?
And not necessarily the elderly, but more specifically paraplegics. And as a chemical, what it literally does, it expands the capillaries for greater maintenance of blood flow, and then it essentially freezes itself, and
it's apparently unbelievably effective.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, you're talking about expanding your capillaries greater than they ever would have been possible naturally, and then locking in that greater capacity until it dissipates. But to do it, it's a real shot that they're taking at the base of their dick. Now, my problem is does that not have a medical implication? Whereas if I knew a girl was doing anything with the needle other than getting her blood drawn, I would have an issue with that. Twice a month, I get my blood drawn for our talent. That's in my arm. I'm not gonna put a needle in my dick. See what I'm saying? I'm 54, bro. Let me tell you something. If I got to the point where I had to do that, I'm sorry, I'm done. I'm done.
Step back,
I'm done. But so that's not taking away from the guys that do. I understand that there's a greater pressure now because, like I said a second ago, there are so many more guys that can do it that the level up is becoming such that guys are doing that. See what I'm saying? Like if I only had to worry about a limited number of black guys that were shooting black on black and interracial, right? Were 5 other dudes. So a producer director would have the option of 5 other guys, Rico Strong in my era, obviously Mr. Marcus, obviously, whether Richard Mann, you know what I'm saying? Killers, bro. I'm not talking about weak motherfuckers. I'm talking about guys that masters at this shit, right? But now, instead of 5 other dudes, there's 10 other guys that are killers, right? So it's much more competitive. And so guys are taking the next level up to outdistance. I mean, like, there's powerful dudes out here. Rob Piper, Hollywood Cash, Dredd. See, because now not only is it a performance thing on a competitive level, but because you have a broader pool of access, there are guys that are sizable. Now you have guys that can perform and also bring size. So the marketplace has gotten much more competitive and much more difficult to get employed.
Did it feel like back in the day that you were one of the very, very few guys who was really capable of this, and that it was this sort of secret Jedi art that was just, it would be unrealistic to expect most guys to be able to get into it?
Well, look, if I could explain to the generation today what it was like to do this when I began, my first 10 years, they would think that they would find it very, very difficult to. Well, here's the thing, Matt, because the skill set you don't get it overnight. Whereas like my mental gymnastics were something I've developed over 25 years in the industry. So what I'm able to do mentally, as a male performer, may be something that would be baffling to someone. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm talking about being able to fully transpose, to literally transmogrify a physical presence in front of you and substitute her with a complete other female. I can do that.
Really?
Oh yeah, and it will get me out of trouble, where normally I would have no chance of having the motivation to achieve the type of erection that I'm known for being able to do, and then to do what I'm being paid to do well.
Okay, you tell me. This is one thing I've kind of noticed. When you're talking about a true BBC, a really not even just a black guy, but just any,
right?
It takes quite a bit more work, it would seem to me, to get a dick that big, fully hard.
No.
And okay, this is just my observation. You can tell me if I'm wrong. It's also like there are various levels to it being hard, since it takes so much blood to fill this thing up, that sometimes I'll see a guy that I know who has like a really big dick shooting, and it'll occur to me like, oh, he's making it work, but it's not all the way there.
No.
True or false?
False.
Really?
100%.
Okay.
Look, every man that you see that is a man has the same mechanisms of action in his body. Nothing's different between me or you. So what makes my dick work and the way that happens as a physical, flow chart is the same in me and you and the next guy, right? So if my body says, hey, this is what it takes to get ourselves 100% erection, it's the same code. It's the same code of action that everyone has. See what I'm saying? So if my body is built to pump up my penis to 11 inches and is built to pump up your penis to whatever size it is, it's the same mechanism of action. My pump is no better than your pump. See what I'm saying? So that's where it becomes a mental thing. Because at a certain point, all of us can be fucking and have our most greatest rendition of an erection we ever had, right? But what makes the difference in this scenario and another scenario? Same guy, different scenario, right?
Right.
Different hard on. Well, the problem it comes down to, can a person have the mental acuity to get themselves at their maximum level regardless? And so I wouldn't say that's a case of because a person is larger, he has a more challenging road to getting an erection. No.
Okay.
It's because then what about the guy that's got a smaller dick,
right,
that can't get a hard on? One would think that by that same metric, it would be easier for him to get a hard on than Mandingo.
For sure, there's no hard and fast rules, because I remember at one time we tried to shoot a scene with a guy who was basically a fan with another girl. Never came out. It was a total disaster. His dick was maybe 4 inches, super hard, had a crazy bend in it, and
Peroni's probably
he couldn't get hard. He's on Viagra. He's drinking, which I did not authorize, and the way he struggled, I was just like, holy shit.
It can be brutal.
Yeah. And in that moment, watching him try to shoot with this girl who was really trying hard to accommodate him, I realized how essential an at least good-sized dick is, because it seemed like it was going to be almost impossible for us to get a good shot of this little shrimp thing going in and out of her. It was just like, wow, in this moment, I can really see. And I always think the same thing when I'm watching like a crazy DP scene or whatever. It's like, in that scene, having a very long dick is so important, because otherwise you're definitely not going to be able to see the action, and the guy might not even really be able to get himself in there. He's gonna it's gonna require that he's too close.
Well, no, those things are true. I mean, DPs are very, very difficult, but the one thing that I believe is imperative is that you have to have enough for the female counterpart to do her thing. As a male performer, I've always considered myself the stage and or the platform that the star performs upon. The star is a girl. In every commercial endeavor in this business, is the female. And this is in heterosexual media. It's always a girl.
All about glorifying them.
It's all about, I mean, you know what I'm saying? You as a dude should provide the stage that she does her thing on. Now, if you provide a smaller stage or a limited stage, then you're limiting the ability of that professional to execute what has made her the star that she is. The broader, the larger of a stage you can provide the star to work on, the greater the production ends up being. And thusly, that individual that provides a larger stage gets hired more often for all the other stars to dance upon. See what I'm saying?
There's been times where I've been shooting with girls and they're so good at giving head that they're deep throating this thing and their lips are literally like on my ballsack.
Yeah.
And then I'll watch a scene of that same girl working with a guy with a really large one, and it's like they're just navigating the top 3-4 inches of that thing, and also due to the wideness, they're able to take way less of it into their throat, which is that in that situation, I am like, wow, okay, so maybe there is at least some sort of silver lining to being more average sized.
Nah, I get that, but let's bear in mind, right? What we're dealing with are professionals, performers.
Yeah.
Professional performers of sex. Now, that same girl, she's performing. What I'm saying is a girl that could do a deep throat to an average size may choose to not use that same skill that could probably deep throat me. And I'm in double digits. You know, I've reached the double digits in terms of length. She could probably do me to my balls as well because she's got that skill set. She may choose to acclimate herself only to halfway because she knows that visually it's more stunning.
That's interesting. Okay.
And she's well, because I remember we're not, these aren't at this level, at the level that I operate at, the women are super professionals at sex. They know what they look like when they're doing that blowjob. They know it's more impressive for herself and myself if she can make it look like this is so big that no one can take it even halfway, but she got it halfway.
Right.
So she's celebrated for doing so.
We both know that there are super famous porn stars, women, who look incredible.
Yeah.
Their head-giving skills are okay. And then there are girls who are just genetic freaks.
Yeah.
Where they just give the most ridiculous top. And sometimes when you're dealing with a girl like that, it will occur to me, all my friends outside of porn probably will never experience anything like this because I know I didn't really experience it until I got into the business and you start dealing with that upper 1%.
Yeah. Yo, there's levels as in anything.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? As a performer in any commercial orientation of a performance art, there are levels to it. And I appreciate the chicks because I mean, like, you know, like when the girl can get to the bottom of me, I'm like, yo, like that's pretty solid. But I also remember that she has probably blown about 10,000 penises.
Yeah.
So she's not tripping on me.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It might take Dread or Mandingo to make a girl trip.
Right.
But in my experience, I've never came across a girl that really, really couldn't do an impressive job on me. You know.
Right. So, okay, at what point, I'm assuming that by the time you start winning Performer of the Year, which you won 3 times, right? That's when you've really kind of reached the top of the industry. What a lot of people probably wonder, what does it take to win Performer of the Year? Is it primarily just shooting a lot? Is it specific scenes being like really well known and noted at the time? What got you into that position, and was there part of you that wanted to keep chasing it and think,
well
if I do this 10 times, then I'll really be a legend?
All right, so
or is that even an accolade that really means that much to you?
No, I mean it you know, it means a lot. It has meant everything. I mean, you know, not literally everything, but I mean, like I won. For me, it was so long ago, 2000, 2002, 2003. So most people that I work with may not have even been born then. You know what I'm saying? But here's the qualification for the Performer of the Year's Awards used to mean one thing, and I don't know if it means the same today. When I started in my first 15, 20 years, I was nominated 16 out of my first 20 years in the business. I got into Hall of Fame in 2009. I won Best Male Performer in the World in 2006 at the Venus New Media Award Show in Berlin. So I've been there. I've been to the mountaintop. Okay, one thing, it meant more money.
Right.
I can charge more. My rate went up.
Okay.
By about $300. It didn't go up again for 10 years until I came back and I charged people more for me performing in your stuff now that I came back. But what it means to be a male performer or a female performer, the qualification is this. It doesn't mean that you shot a lot necessarily, but as a guy, it means that you are the person that is typically paired with the biggest production. This is a guy that's always the leading man in a movie, in a feature movie. Maybe not because he can act, but because he can always turn in a good performance scene.
Right.
So it's the guy that is the go-to guy for the most number of studios. Now, so when the first couple times I won, if there were 20 studios, maybe 18 of 20 would say their number one dude was Lexington Steele. Okay. Now, it could be a guy that is Brazzers number one because they're the biggest company. So if Brazzers says this is our guy or these are our guys, the pool of best male performer may be limited to just those couple of dudes. And it makes perfect sense. And that's why I really believe that Male Performer of the Year is perhaps the most genuine of the big awards at the award show, because there's no, you can't buy a Male Performer of the Year award. Whereas Movie of the Year, yes, Female Performer of the Year, in some ways there are other machinations at play as to why a woman wins Female Performer.
See, I always wonder that, but I never really have any kind of evidence to go on.
Yeah.
But it always seems like, well, she's a great performer, sure.
Yeah.
But also, it would seem that the companies who are advertising all over this award show are also heavily invested in her.
if you have X amount of AVN covers, right, and it's the same girl, then it makes perfect sense that girl may be deserving of the award.
Right.
But unless she is outperforming Angela White,
Right.
unless she's outperforming Jennifer White, unless she's outperforming, and this is back in the day, unless she was outperforming, any of the, it's all subjective, but there's a long answer to it. But the short answer is that I'm happy that the male performer still remains one of the purest accolades available.
Definitely. Like when you're talking about being able to sort of be a mercenary and get in there and do the job no matter what. For me, the only times where I've had a hard time shooting was when I was shooting enough that I didn't give a fuck anymore. That, the part of my brain that always as a normal dude wanted to have threesomes and wanted to have crazy sexual experiences, that part of my brain has always been very active. But then I have a week where I got to shoot, 4 or 5 days, and sometimes you got to shoot more than once in a day.
Yeah.
And that was when I would maybe start to struggle, when you've got a beautiful girl in front of you. And part of your brain is saying, like, yes, she's hot. This is good. Let's do it. And the other part of your brain is like, I don't give a fuck anymore. Yeah. Do you ever encounter that? And did that ever make it kind of difficult?
Well, here's the thing. I got to a point where I was able to really orchestrate how many times I shoot, you know what I'm saying? Whereas, I'll shoot a minimum of once a week. So minimum of 4 scenes a month, at least once a week. So say there are weeks where there might be 2, maybe 3 scenes in a particular week. So that I'm working more than maybe I had allotted for a particular time period. It's very easy to be tired. But the thing is, what I found is I try and take every scene as if it's the only scene that matters or the only scene that I have. So I'll leave it all on the table today, and then I'll be like, okay, so I shoot tomorrow. So then I have to prepare to leave it all on the table tomorrow, knowing that maybe the next day I could rest the next day. So, I've always looked at it as in leave it all, leave everything, totally empty your tank and just expand your tank.
I feel it. I mean, I remember watching an old interview with Titi Boy where he said that for a very large percentage of his adult career that he was shooting and finishing 4 or 5 times in a day.
Yeah.
That's astonishing to me. I've never heard anyone else suggest that they were capable of doing it at that scale. And that's also without any drugs.
Yeah, it was well before that, yeah.
That's just shocking to me. I'm not going to take anything away from him because I've never heard anybody really question those claims. I don't know if maybe as time goes by, maybe exaggerate a little bit, but that to me is astonishing. How many times did you average in a day? Were you ever doing days where you had to go multiple times like that?
Well, okay, so you got to remember the quantity of productions between the years of, I can only speak as early as 1998, say 98 through 2010. The number of studios versus times that by the number of how much production was necessary to feed the release schedules.
Right.
The work was there. So when Titi Boy says that he was doing as many as 4 scenes in a day, he wasn't lying and or exaggerating because he can go from then you can go from one studio, say call time at 11.
Right.
If you're knocking your scene out, you might be done by 2. And then you say, oh yeah, boom, I can catch that 3 o'clock scene that I got booked with. Yeah, I doubled it up. No worries. And then if you're in the know, you knew that Devil's Films was shooting a 5-on-1. They did every Wednesday. If you can make it there at 7:30, you can get in the 5-on-1. So right there are 3 scenes in a given day. Now I could do that. I was doing that maybe twice a week. You know, where certainly enough I couldn't do that now. But I mean, back then, yeah, like, you know, because there was that much work available. And you got to remember, let's bear in mind, you know, like I said about the women, at this level, the dudes of this business, we're at this level for a reason. You know what I'm saying? And I would expect that a person in the NBA can shoot a jumper better than myself. Right. I pay that person to do that. So the dudes are paid to be the type of dude that can do 2 scenes in a day. Right. See what I'm saying? And here's the thing about it. We would hope that the guy that tries to do that can do it. It's when the guy thinks he can do it and can't. So I would know guys that think that, why are you here at the 7:30 shoot when you know you're only good for 1 scene, right? So he would get clowned. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, and then Titi Boy, you got to remember, is arguably the greatest American performer in porno history.
Wow, you'll give him that. That's intense.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, every male performer's reputation precedes him amongst ourselves. Whereas there's a bit of a brother, there's a bit of fraternal element to the male performers, and no one in the history of porno can point to a scene in which Titi Boy failed.
And he did say that in that interview as well, that he had never taken an L, which having a not 99, but 100% success rate, that's astonishing.
And I might be one of the last of the Mohicans that could attest that. Because my first scene, December of 1997 in Los Angeles, featured Titi Boy, Guy De Silva, and Anari Vox in a 3-on-1. And then Titi Boy was the man then in 1997 and was till the end of his career. And it's still lauded as perhaps the greatest American, certainly enough the greatest white American, because of the 0% failure rate. You know what I'm saying?
That's incredible. Yeah. How much of it do you think is just being naturally extremely horny? Because that's certainly the vibe I get out of him. Is like, wow, this is a guy who might have done all this for free. Well, okay. Not all of it, but quite a bit of it.
All right, so you know how like there are certain guys that are like wound like a copper battery, if you will, right? You know, like Titi Boy's wound like a fucking, you know, like the tightest of metal wires, right? Coiled like a spring. Certain dudes are so naturally charged with testosterone that they're like, you know, what's that? Like a whirling dervish, like a Tasmanian devil, right? There are dudes that are literally a Tasmanian devil in the flesh. In the business, as professionals, will bring in different people with different skill sets. Titi Boy had a skill set that was his physical charge was such that he could plow and mow through women because he liked he was a bull. And one must not mistake the physical attributes with what a person can do. Right. Whereas physically, he was not the largest of dudes, but he commanded the largest of stature. And so that allowed him to plow through women because girls would melt in front of him because of his exudance of testosterone. They would like, so he would shoot with he would be like the guy that would always shoot in the biggest of feature productions with the most expensive of female talent. Right. Because he never failed. And he would I'm not gonna say I would say he would murder the chick. I don't want that's kind of right. So he would do very well with the chicks that he shot with. So and I speak so highly of Titi Boy because he's one of the few people that has mentored me personally, and before I got into the business, he was one of my heroes before I got into the business.
Right.
See what I'm saying? So when I worked with him, I was like, oh my God, the God, Titi Boy, you know what I'm saying? And, he was a bully, you know what I'm saying? And I appreciate that, you know what I'm saying? Because
Bully in what way?
I mean, man, like Guy De Silva was cool. Anari was very, very great. You know what I'm saying? So she was really, really ready to service all three of us. But you had to get Titi Boy to get out of the pussy, you had to be ready to do the same thing he just did, or he wasn't going to relinquish the position to you.
Wow.
So, like, I'm the new guy. All I had was my size. But my size was rendered useless because my mind was completely taken out of sync. Because I couldn't muscle my way into the action, because to muscle my way into action meant I had to force somebody else out. And I didn't have that skill set. I learned that skill set. And once I learned the skill set, I wielded that like a fucking, I was like the AC-10 of the business. I was like the warthog. I'd mow it down, man. I was like, I've always been like a C-130 out there. You see me coming, you know what I'm saying? But yeah. So being a bully, you know what I'm saying, is a part of the industry, and only certain people can wield that disposition well. He was perhaps the greatest.
Wow. It's intense. What are there any scenes that stand out to you on a personal enjoyment level? Like, wow, that was the hottest thing I was ever a part of.
Yes. Well, I can identify the greatest hard-on I've ever had.
Ooh, wow.
And I can identify the one time I utterly, these are two separate occasions, the one time I literally lost control and had an out-of-body experience.
Whoa.
The beautiful girl, my favorite performer of all time, it's a girl by the name of Naomi Banks.
White girl?
No.
Oh, wait. I'm thinking of somebody else. There's a different Naomi I was just thinking of. I got to look her up.
Naomi Banks is like...
I can't hear the story without looking
Oh,
her up.
my God. She's the hottest black woman, in my opinion, in the history of pornography. 5'10", beautiful brown skin, beautiful hair, incredible eyes, titties that were perfect, fat ass, tall, articulate, intelligent.
Okay.
She was the total package, right? Now, her and I had done several scenes together. I had her on the cover of at the time at Mercenary, I had like 9 different lines. I think she was on the cover of 7 of my 9 lines I had over at that period. I remember that this particular time we had shot together, maybe 3, this was like the 4th time we shot together, right? But by this 4th time that we were shooting together, at this point, we're pretty good friends. Her husband was Mike is super cool. Her husband was super cool. Good people. But it was the 4th time we'd been together, so we were very familiar. So she knew what got me going, and which was everything. And I think it was one time we both were like, let's just do this like it was personal. And man, I literally know that I've never had an erection that physically was so daunting that it was painful.
Wow.
And it was made for a great scene and made for great photos, and I'll never forget it because I'd never been so attracted to someone at a given moment. And that was Naomi Banks. Now, the other time was a girl by the name of Kiara Mia, which is a play on Quiero me in Spanish. So you want me, Kiara Mia.
Right.
So what happened with Kiara was this Latina, oh my God, yeah, thick, perfect, big ass titties, fat ass, black girl ass on a Latina, thick black hair, man, flawless caramel skin, the whole deal. Grown ass woman. We were fucking, and I literally what happened was I was going crazy, right? And I literally stepped out of myself and I looked at this woman and I saw the look of her face and I saw her looking at me. And it's crazy. The look on her face made me realize how I must have been looking in the moment. And I was like, holy shit. And I snapped out of it and I got myself back together. So those two things stand out. Where the one moment where I realized that this is the greatest erection I've ever had for a woman in my life. That was with Naomi. I'll never forget that. It was how attracted I was to her.
Wow.
And then with Kiara, and since then I've never lost control in a scene because I realized that I was no longer aware of what I was perhaps doing to her that may not have been pleasurable. It was in a missionary position, and it probably looked fantastic on camera, but I knew I wasn't there. I knew I had crossed the Rubicon, and I was no longer there. And I saw her face, and I was like, "What am I doing that makes a woman look at a dude like that?" And I snapped out of it, and I was like, "Yo, cool your heels." So I'm never completely out of control when doing a scene now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. You dated or were married to a couple different performers over the years?
Only one.
Okay, just one.
Yeah, you know, people think that I was married to a certain person, Vanessa Blue,
right,
back in 2006. But what it was, we announced our engagement on the stage in January of 2006. I didn't propose to her. People think I proposed to her, but we just because we had been a long time couple. We were an industry power couple. As a highly successful Black couple in the industry, me with, you know, she was a director at my company. And Vanessa was a great female director. And when I qualify her as female director, she was a great director. But we never went on to get married. We fell apart by June of 2006, never to be married. And then around 2014, 2015, I was involved with a Canadian, who eventually I got married with. You know, her and I got married, and so we spent 3 semi-tumultuous years together and parted ways in 2018.
Okay.
So Wikipedia would have it that we're still married. See what I'm saying? But Wikipedia also has me at, I think, 59 years of age, some bullshit.
Yeah, I saw it. And it's funny how the accuracy of Wikipedia articles about certain segments of society is largely based on how dedicated random volunteers are to maintaining that information. Yeah. So there are certain niches like comic books or fantasy films or whatever that are like extremely detailed and accurate. And then sometimes, like even with rap, sometimes I go to a rapper's Wikipedia article and I'm like, wow, this is extremely incomplete and seemingly hasn't been updated in 10 years. Yeah. So I would imagine that's probably the problem with yours. The porn guys just are maybe not dedicated enough.
And then some people want to take strikes. I mean, because they put that on Wikipedia, they know that it's unlikely to be removed. Yeah. And if you have access to that, you know, because here's the thing about, why is it that on my Wikipedia, last I checked, it's not on there that I'm divorced. It's on there. Most people think I'm still married. That was 2018 that that was 6 years ago that we parted ways.
And that's unfortunate because what if you meet a woman and she thinks, I'm going to go look at his Wikipedia. Oh, he's married. What a scumbag. Yeah. He's acting like he's not married. That could actually be problematic. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've experienced that, but, and her name was Savannah Styles. Right. And she's doing well. She has a wonderful life subsequent to our time together. And, kudos to her for it. She wanted to be a mom. She's got a beautiful daughter and a son now and a husband.
You're in a relationship now or? No. You don't think it's for you?
I've been there, done that. and it's not something I'm looking for, Well, two things. I'm enjoying my life too much now to really, to really alter it in any way with a definitive relationship. Whereas if I want to do something on a Saturday or Sunday that I want to do, I don't have to run it by my girlfriend or my wife. And like I said, I've had a number of relationships that were great and some that were not so much great. But what I also realized is that I may not be the best at selection. So I figure, well, look, I've been lucky enough to make it through at least 3 relationships that could have been completely ruinous to my life. I've been lucky that they weren't. And I just figured, well, I'm not going to take a 4th chance because at my age, it's really you're losing too much. The value of a smaller amount of time is increasingly more valuable.
And it stands out to me that I don't know how likely you are to like meet and potentially date regular women, civilians, but it also seems like it would be pretty tough for the average woman to accept that on a Wednesday afternoon you are having sex with an extremely attractive 25-year-old woman.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just got to be a tough pill to swallow. I love the idea of a guy being in a relationship with a normal woman who's okay with that. I just don't know how often that actually plays out like that.
I would say that half of my serious relationships while I've been in the business have been with girls that were civilians, women that were civilians. I've always been very upfront, whereas if you meet me on the street, outside of anything oriented to the industry, you will be addressed with, I will address you with my real name. So you may not know that I'm Lexington Steele because you're not introduced to me as such. Now, because I feel that there are so many determinations that come with that, I want to give you a chance to meet me as an individual. So when I deal with women, I have to let them know very from the outset, yes, I am, my job has been, or my career had been this. And so I found that civilian women are with it. What I found is that as long as they know that they understand that that is a job. Now I have to like what I'm doing, right? And with that comes I take care of them. But yeah, it's a very limiting thing. Whereas, admittedly, if I meet 5 women, it might only be one that would actually even be remotely interested in maintaining a relationship with someone that is either doing porno or has done porno.
Right, because I wonder about that too. Like, I've been in a relationship / married for my whole time having done porn.
Yeah.
But the other day I was having a conversation with my friend Air Thugger, who's a male performer, and he told me a little story about going into a VIP at a club. There's a birthday girl. She's, the belle of the ball tonight. Starts having a conversation with her. She's feeling him. And then she says, "What do you do?" He says, "I'm a porn star." She immediately loses interest.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, I wonder how often that happens. Yeah.
I mean, it happens enough that most men choose to either lie or misrepresent themselves. But the thing is when you do either of those things, it's only a matter of time before you have to come clean.
Yeah.
So I think it really can come down to how you present. You don't want to lie. So you want to say, look, what do you do? Well, I'm in the production of adult media. Oh, well, what does that mean? Well, I'm either in front of or behind the camera. And what I do is, like I said, I produce adult media. Oh, so that make you a porn star? Well, some would consider me that, yes. And then so it is what it is. I mean, some women, now I have the luxury of not working as much as I used to work when I was much younger. So say like if I was in a relationship, a woman would have to feel maybe uncomfortable that I might be working only a fraction of the
If
time.
you're putting in work day after day after day, that might be a little different than knowing you're going off and doing this once a week. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Once a week, maybe they could handle that.
They could tolerate that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah, without, I would be lying if I said that relationships on the personal level have been easy or the acquisition of such has not been easy. The maintenance, is never easy, and the acquisition of relationships is never easy. But it's never easy, and that's not necessarily because of porno. That's just a numbers game. The problem is not only is it a numbers game, but then you do have the caveat of having done movies.
Right.
Right. And the thing about it is, like, whether you've done a movie, you haven't done a movie for 10 years or you did one last week, it's the same. It still equates to being the same thing.
It's still the same mark on your record.
It's still received as such. You could have did it 10 years ago or yesterday.
It feels like women are judged more harshly for having done porn, but for sure, guys, once they get to the point of like taking you serious, it seems like pretty significant.
With women, and it's a plight that I understand that women have to make a determination. Whereas a lot of guys, I can't say never about anything, I can say never about a few things, but I've never had a bad thing from a guy in recognition of me being in the industry. I haven't had a bad experience with that. I've had some communication in social media where some people think that I'm without God because I do movies, you know what I'm saying? Which isn't the case, but as we can agree, most men are lauded for doing movies, and the majority of women receive a different consideration.
Definitely. What made you decide to retire a few years back, and then what led to you returning?
Well, okay, first I wanted to achieve 21 years. And so as of 2019, I cleared 20 years. So that had been my main thing. And then I got an opportunity to work in 19, and then that breached the 21st year. By 2019, I could barely walk. Both my hips utterly destroyed.
And this is from porn.
Well, no, each hip had its own catastrophic injury.
Really?
Yeah, that I didn't address at the time. So my right hip was the first to have a catastrophic injury that I didn't get medically addressed. That got worse. Then my left knee, I had a catastrophic in my left hip that I didn't get addressed.
Wow.
Now, both issues were exacerbated with my hip action in what I do for a living.
Right.
Whereas I was grinding my hips, grinding the what is it called in between the joints? Not collagen.
I feel like I know what you're talking about, but cartilage.
Cartilage.
Yeah.
Bro, let me tell you something. When I went, the surgeon that did my surgeries hadn't looked at my x-rays until the first time I came to meet him, right? Mm-hmm. So he's like, he wheels around this chair and he's looking at the x-ray. I don't know what the fuck I'm looking at. And he says, okay, have a look at this. And he shows me this little narrow line around my hip, in between my hip joints. And he says, this is your hip joint. You see that little line? He said, that's your joint sitting on top of each other. Mm. And then he showed me an x-ray of a joint that had maybe what looked like a fair amount of space between. That's what it's supposed to look like. Mm-hmm. So that's when I knew I had overstayed my welcome.
Really?
And I needed to address my hip replacement. So I had already quit because I reached what time-wise what I want to achieve, but then I could barely walk. And so I said, well, look, why wait to finally get these operations done? Because I knew once I had my hips replaced that I was going to be done anyway. Mm. Or I wanted to be done before I dress. So I probably should have retired maybe as early as 2017.
Okay.
Because from 2017 to 2019, I personally could say, because people probably didn't notice, but I was probably dialing in about maybe 75% of the media I produced or was involved in, because I was just under too much pain.
Really?
Oh my God.
So you were doing a job that was acceptable, but that to you was not indicative of what you wanted
Dude,
to be
I
bringing
knew-
to the table?
Bro, I was not worth the money. Between 17 and 19, man, there was no way. There were times when I would leave the set like, damn, I can't believe I just took that money. Because I knew that the only value I had that equated to the amount of money I asked for was a value in my name. See, I understood that the value of my name on your box cover was perhaps more valuable than the money that you were paying me. You're gonna make exponentially greater amount of money because I'm in your movie than what you're gonna pay me directly.
Right.
So I knew I could show up, damn near take the money. No one gave a because now they could say Lexington Steele was in your movie, and it was a selling point that the person that sells your product could use when he's speaking of the cast list. There's a monetary value in names. See what I'm saying? If your name is not worth anything, then the salesperson is not going to bring it up. So when I stopped in 19, I was fully aware that I needed to stop. I was fully aware that I was in jeopardy of damaging my legacy, if you will, my brand, because I always understood that the last thing someone sees of you. My fear was, what if that is the last thing they ever see of you?
Yeah.
So if you saw me circa 2017 to 2019, man, you might have had a totally different, opinion of who Lexington Steele was. So luckily, I had a great surgeon. He did a fantastic job. He steered me out of getting both my hips done at the same time. He was like, "That's ludicrous. You're single. You live alone. The first 2 weeks, you're going to be 100% immobile." So I was out of the business from basically February of 2019 fully until my return in June of 22.
What was it like taking a step back? Was it
Being out in a way?
Yeah. Was it?
Oh my God.
Was it kind of depressing in a way?
It was depressing. I put on weight, the whole deal.
Really?
I became I became a curmudgeon, if you will, because I got to the point where I was jealous of people that could run or jog because I couldn't ride my bikes. I'm an avid cycler, road bikes, mountain bikes.
Really?
I couldn't do either until I got my legs fixed and my hips fixed. And then once I got my hips fixed, the physical therapy started before the surgeries, right? So by the time I got both of them done, and I was, I've always been a gym rat, and I was able to get back in a certain amount of shape. That was like, I missed doing it, and I was like, the chicks were, I was like, by 2022, I didn't know anybody, or pretty much 95% of the girls I didn't know.
Porn's like that. You take a few years off.
Take a few months off.
Yeah, it feels like
it
a whole
could be
new
a whole
crew. Yeah.
cash out. So I came back in June of 22. My good friend Mike John, who we've done great work, going all the way back to the anabolic days. We both came back together and we said, hey, let's put our heads together like we did back in the day, and we do our thing on the Jules Jordan label. So, so I have a line over there. He has a line over there. He shoots my stuff. I perform in his line as well as other Jules Jordan media. And we got the OnlyFans going, and, we partner on the OnlyFans. This is Mike John, and he shoots my stuff. And the comeback was, started in June of 22, and here we are today.
Right. To what extent does age diminish your ability to be an adult star, a male talent?
Oh my God. Age has a 100% impact, because the email's like this. I'm to the point now where I had to say to myself, I have to go to the gym at least 6 out of 7 days a week. If I don't, look, every fucking meal, bro, I'm telling you, Adam, every fucking meal, I know I'll be held accountable for. Like if I had say if I eat a Ben and Jerry's, am I gonna eat the whole thing? If I get a bag of gummy bears, right? Am I gonna eat the whole bag of gummy bears? Because I know my metabolism is no longer what it used to be. Now, I'm not on testosterone therapy. I'm not on steroids. So there's nothing in my body that's accelerating my metabolism. So I have to spend as much of my time in the gym to the point where it's an obligatory situation. I consider a day in the gym, I equate that to a day in the office.
Right.
I don't park at 24 Hour Fitness. I don't park at the 24-hour parking lot because after 90 minutes they charge you. I park in the lot and walk to the gym from somewhere else because I may be in the gym 2.5 hours.
Really?
See what I'm saying? Because when I was rehabbing my hips, I had to be in the gym. Or my hips, I was not going to be able to walk normal again, to run again. So it was easy for me to keep my ass in the gym because I'm not a young man, and it's necessary for me to put the work in. See what I'm saying? Even on social media, you got motherfuckers that will say certain things like, oh, Lex is lazy or Lex is out of shape. And I laugh at it. I'm like, well, ha, ha, ha. Two things. I'm definitely not lazy. And I would stand up at my age against anybody my age in terms of how good of shape. I make my living, a percentage of my living is made with my clothes off. So I'm, by way of obligation, I'm going to stay in a certain measure of shape. And that takes work. You know what I'm saying? Because I haven't gotten into the testosterone therapies. I've thought about it. And I know that it's something that's still on the shelf. It's just it's same with the drugs. It's just, I don't mean the drugs, recreational drugs. I mean the ED drugs and the needles.
You never got to the point of consistently taking a pill to shoot?
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, I would say not in terms of it being a requisite to shoot. I've always been aware of pills once they became the thing. It's never become my thing because if you become, developing resistance takes a really long time. But if you get to the point where you're obligating yourself to needing that to work, then that's an issue. Yeah. So over the years, have I used it? Oh yeah. Has it been something that it's the difference of saying, have you done cocaine or do you do cocaine?
Yeah.
I have done blow. I have done the ED drugs. Do I do cocaine? I have done it. Do I do it? No. Well.
If it came down to it. Yeah. If you were at the right party.
One of those Diddy parties. But yo, let me tell you something.
You ever been to one of those?
No. Okay. I've been to similar stuff. I haven't been to his. I met him. I did meet him.
Yeah. Was he aware of your?
Oh man, it was the coolest shit, bro. It was AVN of 2000. What would have been 2004. I had a booth at the convention, Mercenary, my company. So he came to the award convention to visit two booths: Tara Patrick over at Digital Playground and Lexington Steele over at his Mercenary Pictures booth. Wow. And that was really cool when I met him. He came over, big wave of people coming over. And you've seen the convention. I saw you there. Yeah. So I'm talking to a guy, and my assistant, one of my managers came over to me and was like, yo, I think you want to talk to this person. And I'm like, oh, give me a second. Because of one of my fans, I forward my fans as much time as I can, That guy may have drove across the country to meet his fans, right? So I look over there and it's P. Diddy. And Diddy is sitting there, he was just chilling. He wasn't like, he had his sunglasses on, had a bad boy varsity jacket on, black with the white sleeves, had the big, dark sunglasses on. And but he sat there patiently with his hands together right there on the counter. It was so cool because you could tell he was like, yo, bro is over there. He knew what it is to appreciate a fan. And he didn't want to interrupt my time with the fan, even though one of the guys that worked for me was willing to pull me away from some random person to speak. So I, that was the one time that I've ever met Diddy. And am I aware of the stuff that he was doing? Have I been aware of it? A lot of the stuff is as much news to me as it is
Right.
to everybody else.
And now that we've heard stories about him and men, it kind of makes you feel like, wow, maybe his appreciation for you went a little deeper.
There is that. but there is that in porno anyhow, whereas like a lot of the appreciation for male performers, can come from anywhere. You know what I'm saying? But with Diddy, no. I would say, of course I wouldn't know, but that was well before even the thought of, and nobody even knew what was going on. See what I'm saying? Like, okay, I've had some pretty cool experiences with meeting celebrities. Meeting Jamie Foxx. That was probably the coolest thing that I've ever been involved with when I met him. And that took place at his compound. You ever been to Jamie's party? Jamie Foxx has a compound in Lost Hills.
Okay.
I believe. Bro, man. You think about Fantasy Island, right? Just mass. I mean, the gate. You go, the guardhouse. What are we going to the what I'm saying? Where are we at? We going to see, it's just incredible. So when I met him, it was really, really cool because at a certain point in the party, they had to be very restrictive about they're no longer letting new people into the house. So I was outside the house. I think I was on my cell phone or maybe having a cigarette. So security on the side of the house, the door that I had just been at, must have thought that I just had walked up to the door or wasn't at the party. And at this point, they weren't letting any more people. So he thought I was trying to circumvent the fact that they were no longer letting anybody in. So I'm telling the dude, like, yo, I've been here all night. What are you talking about? And he wasn't gonna let me back in. So the coolest thing was like, all you heard was, yo, what the what are you doing? And I look over to my right, and Jamie his guards were like 6'6", big dudes, man. Jamie's about 6 foot. He said, come over. And I didn't know whether he was talking to me. And I thought he was gonna hit the dude, the security guy. He was like, do you know who this is my house. If this guy wants to, do you know who the this is? And I'm sitting there like, yeah. Right? And so Jamie was really, really laid into his guy for the fact that that he was going to disallow me from going back into the party. He totally apologized for security, gave me a fat pound. We talked for a second, and he was like, bro, it was like, it's been nice to meet you. I'm like, yo, it's been nice to be at your. So I've been to Jamie's house for parties subsequent to that maybe one or two more times. But I've never, his parties I don't think were like that. They weren't. Right. He has a crazy music studio on his grounds where people are singing that you may not know them from radio, but there's so many people with talents you wouldn't believe, and you would see these people that you're like, why isn't that person on the radio? Or like, why isn't that person like, what I'm saying? I may have been sitting next to, whomever, and I didn't even know until they picked up the microphone. Like, hey, isn't that the guy that was, that's the dude that was on Saturday Night Live last week. And you never knew. He's been all night. You might have seen him, gave him a pound.
Crazy.
So I've never, that's not to say I haven't been at some parties.
Right.
And some parties I've been in attendance, and some parties I was actually working. But I've never been in a Diddy party.
Well, it's crazy because a lot of people make a lot out of the Diddy thing and the freak off thing. To me, outside of anything non-consensual or illegal, the idea of a freak off, that sounds great. Sounds like a fine Friday night from my perspective, until you start getting into the things that may have not been appropriate. But it is kind of weird to hear people sort of act as if everything that ever happens at a late night Hollywood party is necessarily sinister, which I don't think it typically is.
Well, I put it like this. I think that if as with many things, if you are not a participant, then you most often are not even exposed to it.
Right.
I think that maybe there could have been things I was at and in attendance where I wasn't a part of the after party.
Right. You have to have a certain level of trust to get invited to that sort of thing, I think. And that might in some cases mean that they have something on you.
Yeah.
Which is kind of scary to imagine, but
I knew that, and then also bearing in mind, there are females that are more apt to be invited, whereas a guy, you don't need. What event needs another dude?
Right.
So there was enough mainstream celebrities and friends of that group that they didn't need me, as a person that ever got in. So I was more inclined to receive an invitation to maybe do a live sex show at one of these events than I would have been invited to be a person, just a guy at the event.
Right, definitely. And that's not a bad day at work from your perspective. Would you still be available for that sort of thing?
No. I think that was something that was a part. I mean, but not anymore. But for me, I would be lying to say that I haven't done it, and I would be lying to say that I haven't met some very, very good people over the years. I've done some extreme traveling, over the years for work. You know what I'm saying? I mean, yeah.
Just shooting all over the world.
Well, a perfect example. I was in Prague shooting for a week. No, Budapest, and me and my man that was the Hungarian. So he was home. We were in Buda, the Buda and Pest. So we were in the Buda side, and there was a girl that was working in Paris who was a big Vivid contract star, and she had a client. Now her client would do too many drugs and couldn't get his dick hard anymore. So he began to ask her, does she know of a dude that could fly in to fuck her for a couple days? So that was the first time I met one of the richest men I've ever known. Guy owned diamond mines in Tunisia, Africa. And so literally I didn't know that there were like any hotels over the 5-star. I think like 7 stars out there. Like,
really?
Oh yeah, there's more than 5-star. Yeah.
Oh wow,
bro. So they were at the George. The George 5 is a one of the highly exclusive. What is that exclusive American hotel chain that is known for how expensive they are? Well, they were the ultra of this high end. So she saved this the George 5. You can look it up in Paris, and so they flew me. The dude said, "Look, what would it take for you to drop production, leave production, and go from Hungary to Paris?" He bought me out of my own production to leave, to break down production, fly to Paris for 5 days to be to join them. So I finished my production, made money because I was bought out of production. He reimbursed me for all the money I spent thus far to shut down. My camera person was Hungarian, so he was already home. He got a vacation out of it. I went and stayed the George 5. I'd never seen that caliber of hotel, would have never been exposed to that caliber of accommodation. And he was a client of mine for, as many as 10 years.
Wow.
Because the girl was his favorite.
Right.
And so whenever he would hire her, she would contact me and say, hey, can you make it to Maui? Sure, why not?
Sex will take you places.
I mean, well, yeah. I mean, I've been very, very lucky to be one of those dudes that can speak about experiences like this and positively.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, whether it's, yesterday in passing the girl we shot yesterday had mentioned shooting in Japan, in Tokyo. And I was able to look her squarely in her eyes, be like, where in Tokyo? Shinjuku? Roppongi? And these are places that how often does somebody, Tokyo? Yeah, I know Tokyo like that. When I speak of Hungary and I speak of Budapest, were you in Pest or in Buda?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so it was like, So these are things that like experiences that had made me who I am today. But I definitely wouldn't trade for anything. Oh no, that's not true. I would trade everything for one thing, and that is to have kids.
Really?
Yeah.
You regret that you didn't go down that route?
Yeah, that's the one thing I regret.
And you feel like it's too late now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, only because my father was able to do things with me that I'm now too old to do with a son if I had a son now.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's and kind of ironic since you were doing a job that had you on the cusp of making a child almost every day of your life.
I left many children on the table, pardon that pun.
Turns out you were putting the kids on the wrong place.
Yeah.
The face is not going to result in the baby.
Man, like, deliveries in rear. I did a lot of that.
Yeah.
But no, that's the only thing I would trade it all for.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because I wanted to be as good a father as my father had been to me, and I always look forward to it. So, but I got very good friends around me, and my best friends also have sons.
Right.
So every now and again they give me a chance to, if only by them sharing with me their day.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like if my boy tells me like, yo, his son's like one of my best friends, his son is like 5.
Right.
So he'll share with me some funny stuff. Oh, Junior did this today. And we'll have a great laugh. And I can share that. He shares that with me so I can enjoy it as a father would.
It is
and
crazy.
Then,
yeah. Because I got a 4-year-old now.
Mm-hmm.
And it does lessen your productivity for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to balance being as extreme of an entrepreneur as I would like to be with also doing this. And then you're always kind of doing that math before you have a kid in your head of like, I know this is going to take me off my game, but it also seems like it's going to create meaning in my life, and it's going to fill my life with a sense of purpose that I probably wouldn't have otherwise. And I'm definitely glad I did it. Now it's just kind of an issue of like, okay, are you going to do this one more time, 2 more times? I don't know.
It's
kind of up in the air.
Yeah.
But, damn. We're at about the 2-hour mark, and I have another interview on the schedule, but we should definitely run this back sometime because I still got way more questions I would love to get into at some point.
Yeah.
But it was great getting to dig into what makes you who you are, because you're definitely somebody that you can't talk about the history of porn without mentioning your name.
Thank you.
And, all things considered, you seem about as well-adjusted as you could possibly be, having been in the trenches for all these years, which is something that I sometimes notice. It feels like the guys who really win in the long run in the adult game are some of the nicest, most chill dudes, because that's really the skill set that's going to keep you in it for a long time and make everybody want to work with you.
Well, I just always thought and remembered that you have to be humble. You're a person, me being a person that has made their living with their clothes off, you have to have a measure of self-confidence that is also equally measured in humility. Look, on the scale of the pecking order, there are far greater things that other people are doing, and I appreciate the path that's been afforded to me.
Yeah. And it's definitely a way of life that very few people are capable of appreciating or understanding how difficult it is. But that's the one thing. I think it was actually a clip of like an old Titi Boy interview that you did. It was like a panel with a couple other people, and watching that and hearing you guys speak about this art that is really in front of so many people, because such a gigantic percentage of people watch porn, but almost none of them will ever really take time to contemplate or be curious about how difficult of a craft it is to master.
It's a craft. It definitely is. And I definitely have no problem imparting as much of my experience about how to do it, because I think we're losing the how to do it. And that's being replaced with the ability to do it.
Right.
Because the ability to do it can be purchased. The how to do it has to be learned. So,
Lexington Steele, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much
no doubt, man.
for your time.
Appreciate it, man.
Legend. No Jumper, coolest podcast. Like, comment, subscribe. find your way over to my man's Instagram account or his OnlyFans and tap in.
Lex Steel 11, Lex Steel official. Peace.
Appreciate you, man.